and the National Conservative Congress, I started to attend the event of Anthony when he was the president of the EDA. And from the first time, I really engaged with him. It's a new generation of future politicians in our country. We need people like him. It's not usual to find young people at his age participating in politics in Canada. And I really believe that he's going to be an asset for your riding. And thank you everyone to attend. I'm an immigrant like Anthony family, and I really believe that Canadians, first, second, and third generation, and youth needs to get involved more about what is going on in our country. I come from Latin America. I already lost my country from Venezuela. I know what is be against a dictatorship, and I can see some signs right now how Canada is changing. Now Canada is my homeland, and I don't want to move again. That is my personal reason I get involved with the Conservative Party. And probably is one of the reasons that Anthony is doing the same. And thank you so much for everyone to be here, because that means that you care about Canada and you want to work with him for a future for this country. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for that introduction, Alessa. You know, I appreciate that so much. When I was actually going around throughout the entire province for the Conservative Party of Canada, there was nobody that was more vocal than Alessa when it comes to standing up for human rights. And she attests so much to the country when she talks about Venezuela, where she came from. And we want to see this country be prosperous as a nation. My political journey started when I was 14 years old. You know, I was very involved with people like Peter Kent back in the day. And it wasn't about party first, it was about the country first. And we started to see things like freedom becoming a politicized issue when it was a given before in the past. I used to be just a conservative member sitting in the back, not really too involved. But throughout the leadership contest, and when Pierre Poilievre was coming through the leadership ranks, I said to myself, you know what, this guy actually has a message that resonates with me. He's standing up for something called freedom. If Sir Wilfrid Laurier, who is a longtime Liberal and is known as a historical Liberal, was saying Canada's identity was freedom, it goes to show that today, freedom is actually on the ballot. And Pierre Poilievre wants to just reclaim that freedom, which was actually promoted by Liberals like Sir Wilfrid Laurier. For me, my parents, you know, as Alessa alluded to, one's from India and the other one's from Guyana. Back in the day in Guyana, many people were running away from the communist government at the time. It got so bad at the point where they would dig up the railroads and sell it for scrap metal to stop people from running away to other countries that was very prosperous like Venezuela. But we see today in our country a big division between the haves and the have-nots. There's a reason why I have these events every week going around the entire constituency. For me, it's important not to forget about the small communities like in Claremont. It doesn't take much when you're knocking on doors for the day and you hear those small issues that people care about. For example, just north of the railroad over here on Old Brock Road, people are telling me, I don't have high-speed internet. So we're in the country, which is supposed to be the best country in the world, and you're talking about Canadians who are paying $130 a month for cell phone bills, who don't have high-speed internet, and when you go to places like India, they have cell phone bills of $2 a month equivalent. So if we can't do that for our own Canadians, what is our country coming to? I also think it's very important to have this face time with our membership. We're at a pivotal time as to the direction that we want as a Conservative Party. Pierre Poilievre said one thing that was It resonated in my heart. He said, the country is fundamentally broken. We have an immigration system, for example, that Canadians are losing faith in because they don't see that it's benefiting them. We used to hold that as our highest regard and say, economic immigrants that come to this country and contribute to the country, we want them. But now we're seeing ever so often, we're bringing in refugees, for example, and telling them there's the street. I went to Ottawa about 5 months ago, and I get off the coach bus on George Street, and it really hit me and that was the turning point in my mind, where you come off the bus in the nation's capital, you're seeing people that are drug addicted and ODing. On the side of the road, some guy OD'd in front of a Tim Hortons right in front of me. But yet you're seeing government workers in the steakhouses that are eating $80 steaks. And you're saying to yourself, in our nation's capital, we're seeing homeless people left, right, and center. But yet we're seeing people between the haves and the have-nots. I think it's very important in this country that we stand up for what's right. We speak to a message that's common sense. And you know what? When I was listening to Pierre Poilievre, another thing that really resonated to my heart was, as conservatives, we're going to have to be okay to pick up some enemies in standing up for values and our principles like in our country. Because values such as freedom should not be on the ballot. And we have to be comfortable saying, you know what? We will slowly get to everybody in this country and get them buying into our vision. But right now, there is shared pain among many of the working class. There is no middle class in Canada anymore. It's a working class that's working very, very hard, and an elite group of people that are dictating what you should think, what you should do, what your teachers should proselytize in the classrooms to the children. And many parents are struggling. They're working 2 jobs. There's no support for them. There's no support for Canadians, and we're seeing a starkly different nature of our Conservative Party base. There's a reason why I wanted to come here to the Union Hall today, because I think it's so important, because my dad was a union steelworker. If you look back in photos, there's photos of me as a baby with Jack Layton and my dad. But what people don't realize is that in today's day and age, the NDP that was the Jack Layton Ed Broadbents are not the NDPs of today. These are people that would rather basically have a communist government where if you disagree on one issue, you're completely kicked out. They don't want to stand up for a strong private sector. They'll grow. During COVID, we grew the federal government by 32%. But our economic growth in the country was a flat 0 year over year from 2021 to 2022. Which asks simple questions like, who's paying for this stuff? And no wonder we're seeing in the market today, any 20-year-old, you're not able to afford a condominium unless you're in the top 3% of income earners among 20-year-olds. So if this country, if you're in the top 3% of income earners in your age bracket and you're telling me you can't buy a condominium, where is this country heading if young Canadians have no hope and direction? And these are high-performing people. They're people with 3 degrees. They're people like myself who just go to school all the time and say, you know what? We're going to work hard, we're going to get ahead. This country's not based anymore in the most recent years, with our debt at $1.4 trillion, it's not based off of how hard you work and how hard you're going to get ahead. Now it's based on what did you inherit. We're seeing parents taking out of equity from their house to pay for their children. We're seeing physicians getting into the housing market through a condominium. These distortions in our economy are not by chance. It's by actual policy that, for example, 70% of every dollar that was spent in the $323 billion of deficit money spent by the federal government actually went to the top 1% of financial institutions. So when they cry about CERB, it was a terrible thing. We're starting to lose focus on the bigger issue, which is that 70% that went to the top 1% and the big government corporations who basically are bidding, like the We Charity scandal. I went to high school at Brebeuf. Mark Kielberger was actually a graduate of Brebeuf. His brother Craig was a graduate of Barrie Ward, which was down the street. They used to push these things at a school board level onto the children. You must believe in what they're proselytizing to you. The We Charity, SNC Lavalin. Remind people about how in this government It's big government lobbying people and big corporations that are benefiting from most of the government policy decision. Right now, when I door knock, and I feel so blessed, I have such a good team of people. Thanks for the ladies tonight for setting up all the food, and thanks to everybody who went knocking on doors with me today. But you can feel it when we're knocking on doors. You go through a working class neighborhood like Amberlea, which was traditionally a very liberal precinct. All these people are feeling the shared pain of a working class of working 2 jobs and not getting ahead. They're taking equity out of their house to help their kids get into the housing market. And just think to yourself, if you didn't have supportive parents, where would you be? You're basically predestined. There's no chance you're going to be able to buy a house no matter what, unless you win the lottery. That's a small, minute chance. So we're seeing people in this country that are feeling that pain. Working class people. We're seeing fundamental principles like freedom on the ballot. And it's ever more important. We have a huge, huge annual meeting coming up on March the 10th. It's going to be held at the Royal Canadian Legion in the south, the one down on Bailey, where all of our members need to get their voices to be heard, especially when I come up here to the smaller hamlets. You have the ability to inform our policy as a local association. If you get that membership and you show up to a meeting and you get your representative to advocate for you on that board, they will create policy that takes care of you, that takes care of things. I will advocate for you and other people will advocate for you, but you will have your voice on our EDA board. That's how our democracy works in the Conservative Party. You need to make sure you get that membership. You have to get that representative here on Claremont on that board. They will advocate for things like internet and high-speed internet. That's a big issue in this area. They'll talk about housing, which is another big issue in this area. Because right now, we need to get the buy-in of every single area in this riding in order to win. Otherwise, we're not going to be successful as a Conservative team. And I agree that we will pick up enemies because we are taking very strong principled positions. But if we engage every Conservative voter and we get them out to vote, 2/3 of our entire membership, only 2/3 of our entire membership voted in 2021. 1/3 of our members actually stayed home and said, I don't think it's worth my time to go and vote. We have the second biggest seniors population out of every constituency in the country. We actually have long-term care homes that don't have a polling precinct in it because we have so many different ones. Only the 2 main ones, Abilon in the west, Aviva in the east, have a polling precinct. As a Conservative team, your membership also helps us bring awareness to get those voters to the polls as well. People don't realize how hard it is. And it's our older generation that understands Canada's identity of freedom the best. We won 2 world wars. In World War II, we used to have ships that were going across the Atlantic. Today, in Canada's Navy, we don't have one ship that's able to go across the Atlantic, yet we're talking about every geopolitical issue in the world. So if we don't have our strength as a nation, we're not going to have a country going into the future. It's a very simple message to people. We need to put Canadians first. We need to get them to buy into the system that they're paying taxes into to take care of them. When we talk about immigration, we have refugees that will come in from overseas. They will come here. They will get dental care. They will have housing. They will get education for their children. But yet, a senior who is paid into CPP for such a long period of time is stuck on a $1,300 check every month from CPP. How do you expect a senior to live on $1,300 a month when your property tax bill comes in for the city of Pickering and there goes $9,000 out the door? How do you expect to save that when your private sector pensions that you're paying into, they're charging you 50% tax when you're pulling it out? So this government right now, we need to put more power back to people. We shouldn't be penalizing people for saving money for their retirement. I believe that we should be reducing taxes on that. I believe that we should encourage people to save, which increases the value of our dollar. We shouldn't just be spending and telling people, better not to save, just spend today because it'll be worth nothing tomorrow. We need to go back to those economic principles that made this country great. When Sir John A. Macdonald came to this country, and I don't want to get into the whole, they're trying to tear down the statues and erase Canadian history, which it boggles my mind every day, because we have to use history to learn for the future. But when Sir John A. Macdonald came to this country and he saw nothing but the fields and the prairies, he was a visionary that said, look, we're going to build a railroad that's going to go from coast to coast, not only for our national security, but for the growth of our country as a whole. And that's the one thing I want to hit on, is we need to have a vision as a conservative party. What are we going to do as conservatives? My biggest fear as a person, and when we look at our local elected representative, is are you willing to stand up when you're in government, when you have big lobbyists, big special interest groups that are going to try to pander and move our economic policies, every single policy across the board, during our leaderships, during our general elections, and they're going to start to pivot as soon as they get into government. We need a local representative that will stand up and say, look, the country was fundamentally broken, and we wanted to provide a different vision for this country. One that puts more power back into people's pockets. That's what we need in this country in a local representative. Somebody that's going to stand up and say, let's not lose the vision that we campaigned on. Let's have faith in that vision, that we will get more Canadians to buy into it through the outcomes over time. After all these issues, I just want to wrap up on just one last thing. Coming out here on a Saturday night when there's a big hockey game going on. It's the Leafs game, right, tonight? Is there a big game tonight for hockey? So for people to come out on a night like this when there's hockey going on, it shows to me that people do care. To come out on a night like this and to make time to come out on a Saturday night. And these big movements start very small. I appreciate the passion of our conservative members. I appreciate people coming out on a Saturday evening. And our conservative movement will only be strong. People are very surprised how big political movements happen with such few people. My whole campaign team, there's not one person that's paid. I have volunteers that are about 20 volunteers, and we're covering the entire constituency of 130,000 people. Big things happen with small people, and people forget that. So it doesn't take much as an individual to make a huge impact here locally as well. So I'm encouraging everybody here today, please, 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 it's important that A, you get a membership, B, you come out and have your representation on March the 10th. It's on Sunday, March 10th at 2 o'clock at the Canadian Legion down on Bailey. So it's the Pickering one in Bay Ridges. Make sure you get your voice heard. Make sure that in our process, when we make our platform as a conservative party that we're running in on the next election, and they make it specific to Pickering, what are they going to do for Pickering? You make sure that what you want advocated for is on that paper. Because only you as members could create that policy for the party to campaign on. And when we have strong grassroots members that are making that policy, that's when it's best. When we turn a blind eye and we focus just on rhetoric, that's when the National Party will step in, because they don't know what locals care about. They don't understand that, you know what, it's very discontinuous when you cut off high-speed internet north of the railroad. They don't understand what it means to live along bordering Rouge Park in the west, where people are speeding coming out of the park. What national policy can we make in Rouge National Park to help community safety? These things originate from local policy. So thank you so much for coming out tonight. I appreciate everybody taking the time to come out on a Saturday evening. All right? Have a good day. Enjoy. Make yourself feel like home. Get some food. And I look forward. I'll be coming around and meeting everybody. Okay? Thank you.